There is no law better than the law of Allah. I had a case where the wife was entitled to alimony. And alimony also for me is crazy, right? Because it's this idea that you should have the benefit of marriage without the responsibility of marriage. And that's very satanically inspired. So the issue is, this was a God-fearing woman. She said, oh, I'm not going to take the alimony because it's haram for me. And so I was chatting with another Muslim lawyer that I work with, and that sister, who's a Muslim lawyer, said, I was like, man, I'm so proud of my client. She's giving up her right to alimony under the law because she doesn't believe she's entitled to it Islamically. And the lawyer said, no, Hassan, why are you encouraging her to give up something she's entitled to under the law? I said, because it's not right by Allah. She's like, no, but come on, we're in America, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you know what? If we use the secular law, may give her alimony, which may be a couple thousand a month. However, that same secular law says that the debts of the marriage, which are in the husband's name because he was the breadwinner, he was the provider, have to be equally split. And the husband has hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. But she's also going to take $100,000 in the husband's debt. She has to take that as well. By her choosing Sharia, and she didn't know this about the debt. I told her afterwards, but she didn't know this. I said, by her choosing Sharia and giving up the alimony of a couple thousand a month, she also, mashallah, was saving herself from taking on her husband's debt, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
والقرآن المجيد بل عجبوا أن جاءهم منذر منهم فقال الكافرون هذا شيء عجيب.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to the Muslim Cowboy. Today we have another interview with a guest who I've been really wanting to get on for a long time. He's somebody who is doing a lot of work on the grounds and the grassroots level, helping out people who are downtrodden, overrun. They don't know where to turn. They don't have anyone else to go to. They're dealing with issues with the law, with divorce, with all kinds of things, court in the West, especially in the United States of America. I want to welcome none other than Esquire, Hassan Shibli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, bro.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Such an honor to be with you today, brother. MashaAllah.
No, bro, the honor's mine, and I hope we're not going to take up too much of your time because I know you have a lot of stuff in your schedule, but I think that what we have today to share with my audience, inshallah, do this working together collab. I think a lot of people, inshallah, can benefit from it. Bi'idhnillah.
Inshallah.
So let's say I like starting with people's backgrounds. I mean, I could have done your bio, but I want us to get a little bit more to know about Hassan Shibli. Are you a convert too? Or are you a born Muslim?
It's funny. Once somebody asked me, are you a convert or are you Syrian? And mashallah, I see these similarities even in the physical appearance with you and I. So I see where they're coming with that. But no, alhamdulillah, I was born in Damascus, Syria, and moved with my family to the U.S. when I was 4 years old. SubhanAllah, we moved here and we're living off of $500 a month when we first immigrated. Wow. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really blessed my parents in the dental field. And they wanted me to follow suit in dentistry. But alhamdulillah, when I was growing up, when I just turned 18, actually, I attended an Islamic conference in Canada, reviving the Islamic spirit. And on the way back, they told us to go in for random inspection. So my mom's like, what do you mean random? I said, Mama, random, yani they saw your hijab. But I was joking. I didn't think that would be really the case. And I was shocked when I walked into the room. I saw the room was full of 40 Muslims and just Muslims. We were citizens, but we were held for 6 hours. We were interrogated, frisked, fingerprinted, treated like criminals just for attending an Islamic conference. And I informed them, I said, what I'm worried about is that while you're wasting time with us, real criminals can be getting by. And sure enough, that's what happened. Like I read in the news the next day that a man who killed an entire family in Canada made it across the border with the bloody weapons in his car. But he wasn't stopped because he didn't fit the stereotype of what they're looking for. And that really, as an 18-year-old, opened up my eyes to the dangers of Islamophobia. Very early on, I caught how it made us less safe and less free. It made us less safe because when the government targets people based on their religion, it misses the real threats that have nothing to do with that religious group. It made us less free because, frankly, I can't tell you how many friends I had growing up that stopped showing up at the masjid because their parents were afraid that the government would be targeting them and harassing them. So people became afraid to express their faith identity. And then on top of that, the following summer, I actually visited Syria. And as much as I love Syria, I saw what it's like to live under a government that doesn't honor your rights, that doesn't protect your freedom to practice your faith with safety and security. So at that age, I decided, I want to be a lawyer, and I want to use my law degree to protect the Muslim community. And alhamdulillah, I finished law school in Buffalo, New York, and moved down to Florida and ran CAIR Florida. I was the only full-time staff member at the time. By the time I left, after 10 years of service, alhamdulillah, we had grown to be one of the largest civil rights organizations. We had 25 staff, 8 lawyers. We did millions in free legal work for the community, and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of positive media coverage for the Muslim community. It's interesting because for a decade, I was focusing on protecting the Muslim community from government harassment and government abuse. And alhamdulillah, we were very successful at doing that, and trying to build confidence and pride within the American Muslim identity.
Do you have any like success stories of stuff that y'all did when you were at CAIR Florida? Just one or two?
Oh, subhanallah, so many. I mean, two that stick out was one, the story of Tariq Abu Khudair. I mean, Tariq was a 15-year-old kid at the time. Mashallah, now he's recently married. Mashallah, he's a grown man right now. But I remember seeing viral videos online as he was a teenager of the Israeli police restraining him, tying up his hands, and then proceeding to kick the daylights out of him. When you look at the photos, I mean, his face was purple, bloody, injured. This is a 15-year-old kid with American tax dollars being restrained and being beaten and abused. And the family had given up hope on getting him back. And alhamdulillah, they called my office. We put out a press release exposing how the Israelis are beating an American teenager. That's how we framed it, because unfortunately, the public may not care as much if we had just labeled him as Palestinian. And he was a U.S. citizen. So that went viral. We got thousands of media hits, millions of views. And actually, over the weekend, we're able to get him released from jail. Flew him back to the U.S., had him visit the White House, testify before Congress. Netanyahu was actually planning a trip to the U.S. around that time and postponed it for over a month because of the bad media coverage we generated exposing Israeli crimes against humanity and against the Palestinian people. That's a rewarding case. There's so many. I'll give you just one more. The story of Imam Abu Tawbah. I mean, Imam Abu Tawbah was in the military, had served, then he left because he had some serious disagreements with the actions of the government. But when I visited him, he had been reaching out for years for help, and I visited him in jail, and I was shocked at what I saw. He was in solitary confinement. His feet were bloody because he was in shackles 24/7. He was in very abhorrent conditions. Right after visiting him, he was released from solitary. He was released from the shackles. But what was interesting in that case was he told me that the government, they got me. They had some informant that played around with my taxes. So they got me on a regular white collar crime related to tax fraud. Potentially that's punishable for an average person by a year in jail. However, they were trying to give him 20 years in jail as a suspected terrorist. And the only evidence they had that he was a terrorist was his possession of Islamic literature and his saying, وَانصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ, the last ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah at the end of his khutbah, which like many imams do. And I was astonished. I mean, I remember I didn't believe him when he initially said this until I showed up in court and I saw the government's evidence, and I was blown away because, again, I was offended not just as a Muslim, but as an American attorney that's licensed to practice law here and that's taken an oath to protect the U.S. Constitution. I did not see this simply as an assault just on the Muslim community. I saw this as an assault against the principles of liberty and justice for all Americans. And I remember the U.S. attorney being in the room, and I called him out. I said, how can you do this? You are just decimating the U.S. Constitution. You're undermining everyone's liberty. And the interesting thing is he actually called me on a secure line the next day and said, Hassan, do you think I can effing control this? He was literally cursing. He was saying, this is beyond my pay grade. It comes directly from Washington, D.C. I understand. And this is a sitting U.S. attorney at the time, reporting right to the attorney general who reports to the president of the United States. He says, listen, within my office, we have fought against the prosecution of Muslims because we see how unjust it is. But in this case, I don't have a choice. And he's like, I understand that the Muslim community has been persecuted, not prosecuted, but persecuted by my very own office. And this is unjust, but you have to do your job. I'm going to do mine, but you do yours. I said, I will do mine, and I'll see you in court. And I took the stand and testified. I told the judge, I said, Your Honor, the only evidence you have that this gentleman is a terrorist is his exercising his First Amendment, right? Is his possession of religious literature, is his recitation of the Quran, and I said, if you succeed, then you might as well throw us all in jail as terrorists. And that's what's going to happen. So an assault on him is an assault on all of us and on the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And alhamdulillah, the judge quoted me when he released him to his family after 3 years in wrongfully detained. So, and there's many, many stories like this, but I'm just so grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he's allowed us to be in service of our faith and our community and protecting justice and liberty for all. Did that for 10 years. And then subhanAllah, Allah blessed me with the test of a very painful and difficult divorce, where some foul and evil people and some crooked lawyers, gave my ex-wife and mother of my kids, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her, with the best of guidance and light, gave her some very bad advice. And to the point where she actually came back to me afterwards and we're on good terms and things settled. And she's like, yo, help me sue my divorce lawyer that was coming after you, who pushed me to lie against you, who pushed me to do all the wrong things against you. Can you help me sue her? I'm like, listen, I don't want to have anything to do with that lady. But, it's interesting because going through that difficult period in my life where in that period, because subhanAllah, these crooked lawyers inspire their clients to lie, not recognizing that when you lie against the mother or the father of your children to get an advantage in court, what you're doing is harming the parent of your own children. And in doing so, you're harming your own children. You're harming your own self in that. So when I saw how evil and crooked some of these divorce lawyers were, I realized, like, man, I've spent a decade fighting government abuse, but maybe I need to get involved in the family law area and help preserve families where even if they're going through a divorce, there's no reason they can't do it with ihsan in an amicable and just way. So after, leaving CAIR in my 10 years of service, alhamdulillah, opened up my own law firm, Muslim Legal, and now there's 7 of us. And we help Muslim community in terms of getting married, encourage them to do Islamic marriage contracts and prenups that preserve the marriage itself and preserve the family unit and protect the rights of both the women and the men in the case of a divorce. So we do a lot of prenups, we do postnups, we do Islamic mediation, Islamic arbitration, ethical divorces. We do a lot of immigration work, helping people immigrate to this country or preserve their rights. We do a lot of estate planning. I can't tell you how many times people have passed away without the right estate plan, without the right will and trust, and then their heirs are fighting over the money. That's a shame. It should never come to that point. And if you have the proper estate plan, we can do that. We do criminal defense. I can't tell you how many times there's been Muslims that have been falsely and wrongfully accused, that we've been able to exonerate and get off the hook. I mean, I'll tell you, in court,
I want to talk about that after the podcast is over, because I have my own case for my father-in-law.
Happy to discuss, and Allah grant you tawfiq. But I'll tell you, like, in court, I mean, in the same day, I would go to the domestic violence court twice. Once to represent a man who was falsely accused by his wife of domestic violence in order for her to get an advantage in the divorce. We represented him and we won. And then right afterwards, it's very common, ridiculously common. And the judges are starting to see through it. And then right after that, I was representing a woman who is an actual victim of domestic violence and abuse and was able to successfully assist her. So look, in fact, most of my clients in the divorce cases are women, but we proudly represent both men and women that are facing injustice. And we've seen both sides commit injustice, and it's important that we stay true to our principle and to our faith, and help people find a healthy way to move forward. Because through these conflicts, the only ones that win are us lawyers. We're not cheap. We charge by the hour, and the more people fight, the more money the lawyers make. So I always tell people, listen, I don't want to take your money. Keep it for your children. Make peace. Find an amicable, healthy resolution. Think long term. And remember, Allah is watching. You can use the legal system to take something that Allah has made haram for you, but that will not make it halal for you. And you will have to answer for it on the day of judgment. I tell that to my own clients. I mean, I remember, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, he himself said, do not come to me making a better argument, and then I judge in your favor because you presented the better argument, even though you were in the wrong. And then I'm judging for you a piece of hellfire. If the Prophet ﷺ giving you something based on misinformation that's represented to him can lead you to hell, what about you going to a non-Muslim judge using non-Muslim laws to take something that Allah did not make permissible for you? And Allah says in the Quran, whoever doesn't judge by what Allah has revealed, they are the transgressors, they are the oppressors, they are the disbelievers. So why would we want to seek anything other than the rules of Allah to resolve our conflicts? And I will tell you this as well, I can't tell you how many times I've been before judges. both in family law cases, but also in masjid cases, where masjid boards are suing each other. And the Jewish judge will tell the Muslim board members, hey, I'm not even Muslim, and you're coming to me, a Jewish judge, to use Florida secular law to figure out your masjid's problems. Your religion doesn't teach you how to resolve problems amongst yourselves. I don't even want to hear this case. I've heard that from judges. I've heard from judges telling Muslim couples, a husband and wife, saying, listen, I barely know you guys for 15 minutes, and you're coming to me to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of your lives and your children's lives. Can't you figure it out amongst your own? So we really do want to encourage people to resolve conflicts amongst themselves in an ethical way. And the most hated words to me are, I want to follow the law of the land. Look, the law of the land doesn't force you to take alimony from your wife. The law of the land doesn't force you to take half of your husband's assets. The law of the land doesn't force any of that. You're choosing to do that. The law of the land encourages mediation. It encourages amicable resolution, and you can do that if you choose it.
For those ignorant Muslims, ignorant isn't that they don't know yet, that are out there that might be listening to this, can you kind of go over the what the Sharia says in issues of divorce? Because they might be like, what? Women don't get half of a man's wealth in Islam? Like, kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Well, look, Sharia aims to make peace, to avoid confusion, and to retain the independence of both the husband and the wife financially. So under Sharia, right, whatever the wife owned before the marriage and whatever she accumulates after the marriage is hers and only hers. And same with the husband, whatever he owned before the marriage and whatever he gets during the marriage is his and only his. There's no confusion about that. The problem with the American legal marriage system is that both parties lose the right to independent ownership. That creates resentment, that creates chaos, that creates confusion, that creates ambiguity, and it often creates a financial incentive to divorce whenever one party has more than the other. Because the other, okay, why should I put up? I mean, I have a case right now where the wife was a stay-at-home mom, and mashallah, she started a home business, and Allah bless her, she became a multimillionaire. But since then, they've had so much conflict, and the husband keeps trying to take half of her wealth, right? Because she lost the right to independently own assets because she got legally married without an Islamic marriage contract. Essentially, when you're getting legally married without an Islamic marriage contract, you're saying that you want the state to determine your contract that you're entering into. And you trust the state to do that at this non-Muslim state, which may change it on a whim. Why do that? Why not? Why don't you trust yourself to enter into a better contract? So the problem is both parties lose the right to independent ownership. That creates a lot of confusion. It also creates a financial incentive. I don't believe there should be a financial incentive to divorce. I think if people got to get divorced, it should be for a practical reason and not finances. And the same time, the Sharia contract also provides for the mahr mutaakhir, a payment, and it can be a significant payment. Look, I support a modest upfront dowry payment, and I also support that there can be a larger deferred payment in case of a divorce. It could be $5,000 per year of marriage. It could be $10,000 per year of marriage. So if a couple makes $100,000 a year, or the husband makes $100,000 a year, and he agrees, okay, look, if we get divorced, I'll give you $10,000 per year of marriage. So after 10 years, they hit a conflict. The wife knows, if I'm going to get divorced, I'll get $100,000. $100,000 for somebody who's living on $100,000 a year lifestyle is not so much money that somebody's going to want to get divorced just to get that $100,000. At the same time, it's not so little that the wife feels she's stuck in an abusive situation when she needs to get out, right? It's modest enough to keep her on her feet, and it's not large enough that she's tempted to divorce just for that. So the marriage contract removes ambiguity. It removes the financial incentive. It ensures that whatever is the husband stays the husband's, whatever the wife is the wife, and that there is a guaranteed payment to the wife in case of a divorce. The final thing I would add to that is that the marriage contract also protects from the debt. So I'll tell you a very quick story. I had a case where the wife was entitled to alimony. And alimony also for me is crazy, right? Because it's this idea that you should have the benefit of marriage without the responsibility of marriage. And that's very satanically inspired. And I believe that shaitan really works to tempt people and misguide them. So in Sharia, besides the mahr mutaakhir, besides support for the iddah, once a woman is no longer your wife, you're no longer responsible for supporting her financially. So minus the child support, which is going to go to support the children. But the idea with this alimony, of course, is that the husband keeps giving a third of his income, maybe even half his income, to support his ex-wife. That's going to create a lot of resentment. It's not healthy financially. It's just not wise. So the issue is, this was a God-fearing woman. She said, oh, I'm not going to take the alimony because it's haram for me, you know. And so I was chatting with another Muslim lawyer that I work with, and that sister, who's a Muslim lawyer, said, I was like, man, I'm so proud of my client. She's giving up her right to alimony under the law because she doesn't believe she's entitled to it Islamically. And the lawyer said, no, Hassan, why are you encouraging her to give up something she's entitled to under the law? I said, because it's not right by Allah. She's like, no, but come on, we're in America, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you know what? If we use the secular law may give her alimony, which may be a couple thousand a month. However, that same secular law says that the debts of the marriage, which are in the husband's name because he was the breadwinner, he was the provider, have to be equally split. And the husband has hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So if we go with the American law, okay, maybe she's going to get alimony, which is a couple $1,000s a month, but she's also going to take $100,000 in the husband's debt. She has to take that as well. By her choosing Sharia, and she didn't know this about the debt. I told her afterwards, but she didn't know this. I said, by her choosing Sharia and giving up the alimony of a couple $1,000 a month, she also, mashallah, was saving herself from taking on her husband's debt, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, there is no law better than the law of Allah. No. If you don't believe that, you can't be Muslim. How can you think a state, modern, secular law is better for you in the dunya and the akhirah than Allah's law? It's impossible. It protects women. It protects the family. It protects the husband. It protects the children. So the gist of it is, if you get married without an Islamic prenuptial agreement, you lose your right to independent ownership. Anything that's yours can be split with the spouse. And it's not necessarily the husband to the wife. It could be the wife to the husband. If the wife is wealthier, she will have to pay alimony. And it happens, you know, she may have to give up her assets. And it happens. I have women calling me crying that some guy married them and then divorced them and now is trying to take half of their properties that they own. It's insane. So the legal marriage gives up the independent right to own property. And it also forces both to share the debts. Sharia is completely different. Sharia says what each party keeps what's theirs, and the husband is responsible for the maintenance of the household during the marriage. You know, there's no better law than Allah's law.
Awesome, mashallah. But when it comes to like, I mean, I wanted to talk about the youth, and we'll get to that, inshallah. But I'm so intrigued right now, and I want to go down this rabbit hole. So, whenever someone does an Islamic marriage contract, do they even still need to go do like and get married down at the courthouse, as it were? So that way,
great question.
Because they think, okay, well, what if something happens to me and I go to the hospital? I'm gonna have to have my husband or wife, you know, be notified. They have to be able to come visit, all this kind of stuff. If we're not legally married, then we're not gonna have rights, right? So
great question. Great question. So look, I had a very wealthy doctor come to my office the other day. Mashallah, she's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And obviously everything is always confidential. I'm not giving information enough for anyone to identify her, but there's many people like her. And she told me, Hassan, I don't want to get legally married because, you know, I own this, I own that, and I make hundreds of thousands a year. And I don't want to risk getting legally married and then the guy deciding to divorce me and take what I've built my whole life for. And subhanAllah, when it's a sister, she's going to get a lot of sympathy. Everyone's going to be like, yes, sister, you're doing the right thing. Don't get legally married. Protect your rights, protect your assets. If a man says the same thing, oh my God, you know, and people coming after him. Double standards, unfortunately. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know, and I think her thinking is not wrong. I mean, we can do a prenup. Prenups have a strong effect at protecting her. But obviously, if you don't even enter into the legal marriage to begin with, that's a strong protection. Now, there's concerns about, well, what about different rights? What about, you know, in the case of death? What about in the case of hospital? All of that we provide solutions for at Muslim Legal. We can do an estate plan that guarantees inheritance. We can do a living will. Medical directives. We can do all of these legal contracts that can ensure that you still have very close rights as if you were legally married without the entanglement financially that legal marriage does. That's the first thing. So it is possible. You know, I would say, I mean, sometimes people need to get legally married for immigration reasons. That'll be a primary one. And our office does help on the immigration side. Secondly, people maybe want to get legally married because it may be advantageous for them from a tax perspective. But short of those two reasons, there's really no reason to involve the state in your household. That's what legal marriage is. It's involving the secular state. And you see the buffoons that are running the show. I mean, come on, really? You want these people to dictate your life? With all due respect, look at the politicians that we got nowadays. It's a mess. So, you know, with that being said, I would say that, yes, legal marriage is not necessary for many people. If it isn't necessary, what you should do is, get a good estate plan, get a living will directive, get other contracts in place. And then what you also can and should do,
you can do a power of attorney too, right?
You could do a power of attorney. You should also do a cohabitation agreement, and our office does that. A cohabitation agreement is for people who want to enter into a relationship, who want to live together, but don't want to get legally married, but they still want to distinguish and clarify the rights and responsibilities. So the cohabitation agreement can say that the Islamic husband, not legally married, but the Islamic husband is responsible for the household bills, is responsible for the maintenance, the upkeep. We can talk about meher. We can address all of those through a cohabitation agreement. And then on top of that, look, there's some states, not many, but some states that have what is called common law marriage, which means even if you're not legally married, if you're living together and act like husband and wife, you can be considered legally married, and the state can have authority then and dictate the rules. The cohabitation agreement will protect against that.
Okay, so because I this comes up, and I don't want to talk about anything that could be illegal. But what about people who have multiple wives?
MashaAllah. I mean, there's nothing illegal about having multiple nikahs, right? There's nothing
Yes.
illegal about that. And I think that's a common misconception. It is currently illegal to get legally married to more than one woman, and that includes if you get legally married. And this is something people don't know. If you get legally married overseas, you're legally married here. It doesn't matter if you register it domestically. If you're legally married overseas, you're legally married here. The opposite is true. If you get legally divorced overseas and it's a valid divorce, you're legally divorced here. You don't have to get divorced in both places.
Do you mean
So
through
it
an
is
embassy or through another country's government?
well, through another country's government. Like if you went to Jordan, you live in Jordan, and you get divorced there, that divorce is valid here in most cases. Again, speak with an attorney to get the details. But I've had clients not want to go through a divorce here, so they went overseas and got their divorce overseas, and they appreciated the process. So in terms of polygamy, it is my professional opinion on this issue that to have more than one nikah is not illegal. What is illegal is to legally get married. But if you have more than one nikah, I think you're fine. And the way to protect everyone's rights in that is, again, doing the different cohabitation agreements that protect everyone's rights. There's always a solution to that.
Awesome, mashallah. I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned about how Sheikh Abu Toba was in solitary confinement.
Mhm.
Can you go over, just because of people that I know personally who have been in solitary confinement for 25 years? What does solitary confinement, even after a couple of weeks, do to a person?
I mean, it's horrific. Mashallah. I mean, Abu Toba remained steadfast and strong. When I saw him, he hugged me. He said, "You're the first Muslim brother to visit me from the outside since I've been here in 3 years." And I think just showing up, and I can't tell you how many times just showing up to the local jails and meeting with Muslims has meant so much to them. They said, "Mashallah, we actually have brothers out there that care for us." So I encourage,
Oh, wow.
local communities to look out for their local Muslim incarcerated population. Make sure every jail has a Muslim chaplain. Reach out to organizations like CAIR and other legal ones to make sure they go and they visit the inmates, check up on them, advocate for their rights. We've represented inmates to make sure they can grow out their beard, to get halal. And the jails have been very responsive to that. In fact, in Hillsborough here in Tampa, we've trained about 4,000 law enforcement officers and jail personnel about respecting the rights of Muslims, and that has a positive impact. But I
Mashallah.
mean, look, solitary confinement is a form of torture. And with Abu Tawba, it wasn't just solitary. I mean, he was literally in chains, so his feet were bloody because the chains just rubbed off the skin, burned off the skin off of his legs. It was horrific. It actually rusted, so they couldn't open it. They had to ply it off. They had to cut it off with a metal cutter. That's the situation. And one of the areas of regret and pain in my life is always feeling that we truly have not done enough for the incarcerated Muslims and the people that are unjustly incarcerated throughout the world. Certainly here in the U.S. Let's not forget the torture and the abuse that's happened in Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, and throughout the world. There's a day of judgment, and the oppressors will have to answer. But I believe also we have to answer about what have we done. And look, if it's truly beyond our ability, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. We know even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were imprisoned Muslims that the Prophet ﷺ, or exiled Muslims that he wasn't in a position to help. So we accept that and we understand that. But certainly at the very least we can be praying for them and advocating for them. Let's not forget even Sister Afia Siddiqui right now, who's in horrific conditions here in the U.S. We were hoping that the Pakistani government would do more to advocate for her release. Now we see they've even arrested their own president there. So,
Yeah.
wallahu musta'an, wallahu
All the
musta'an.
time. Astaghfirullah. Oh man. So now I want to move to back to the youth. Okay. And so you mentioned like bad divorce lawyers and how like they lie, and the parents think that lying to get a little bit more over in the divorce proceedings is going to help their cause, but in fact, they're actually hurting the kids. Like, how bad do these proceedings and like a lot of the stuff that happens with divorce lawyers, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, how bad does that hurt the kids? What are some like long-term effects you see?
It's abuse. I mean, there's something called, and courts will use that against you, called parental alienation, which is when you try to harm the parent of your children, when you file false domestic violence charges against them. That's actually in the statute, can be used, at least in Florida, against the accusing parent when they're lying. And those false accusations not only hurt the kids, can hurt the case, but it also hurts the many actual victims, that unfortunately sometimes don't get justice. It's a form of a child abuse. It's parental alienation. It's unjust and it's damaging. And I'll tell you what, in more often than not, I've seen it backfire against the alienating parent, the parent who's talking bad about the other parent. The kids may be brainwashed initially, but it doesn't take long for them to get old enough to see through it, to recognize which parent is always talking negatively of the other and which one is only showing kindness. So my advice, because I get this a lot.
SubhanAllah.
I mean,
SubhanAllah.
my advice for the parents, and I've seen this. I mean, I've seen households where one parent just openly becomes like a disbeliever, like alcohol, drugs,
Oh my
a
God.
horrific lack of prayer, evil talk about the other parent, and the other parent just coming, worried about their children and their future. But what I tell them is, listen, when children see light and they see darkness, they're going to choose the light. So what you got to do is not talk bad about the other parent. What you have to do is be the best example of Islam in your kid's life. Show them kindness, show them love, show them compassion. And alhamdulillah, in a lot of these cases, the kids end up choosing to follow the righteous parent, and they end up choosing to follow their example, and they come out stronger than ever. So my advice to people who are facing, and it happens, I mean, it's a lot, sometimes it's the mother poisoning the kids against the father, sometimes it's the father poisoning the kids against the mother. If you're in that kind of situation where the other parent is poisoning the kids against you, the best way to respond is to show the kids tremendous love and respect and lead by example, and don't stoop to their level. The Prophet ﷺ said, don't be a people without a will of your own, saying, if people do us good, we will do good. If they treat us evil, we will treat them evil. We don't respond to evil with evil. That is not the prophetic way, and the light will win. Allah's tawfiq is always there. And I've seen this firsthand. Kids will love the parent that shows love and compassion, and will turn eventually against the parent that's poisoning the well. And then really the challenge becomes for the parent that wasn't doing that, is even then they have to encourage their kids to keep a good relation with the parent that was poisoning the well.
SubhanAllah. Look at that sabr and that amazing resolve. Like, that's something only that, I'm not saying that maybe other people aren't capable of it, but the only thing that I see that actually advocates for this so well and so strong is Islam. And the example of the
There's nothing
Prophet
like
Muhammad
Islam
sallallahu
for
alaihi wasallam.
Islam.
Nothing
Absolutely.
comes even close. That's amazing. So, I mean, the youth right now, because, you talked about them following the right example, and they're smart enough to understand. But do you worry about the youth in the West? Because of the intense pressure, peer pressure, societal pressure for a lot of things that are being pushed down their throats. Do you worry about the youth, the Muslim youth, for example? I mean, we have a job to spread this message
Of
to everybody,
course.
but do you worry?
I mean, I worry about the Muslim youth globally. Wallahu al-musta'an. Because there's movements, there's organizations that are dedicated to destroying, especially male role models, destroying this idea of patriarchy. What is patriarchy, right? True patriarchy is responsibility, that men are put on this earth to serve their Lord, to serve humanity, to serve society, to protect their family, to provide. So they have responsibility to lead, right? That is not a honor or a blessing. I mean, it is in the fact that it's a form of worship, but it isn't a thing to show off. It's a burden. That's what must be understood. It is absolutely a burden. Allah gave men the burden to serve, and to do so with chivalry, with ihsan, with kindness, with greatness. And, I think the problem nowadays with extreme forms of feminism is they wish to give women authority without responsibility. And they want to give men responsibility without authority, and it leads to a very
Oh,
toxic environment. It leads to a very
oh, wow.
if you have the response, if I as a man am responsible for the safety of my house, I'm responsible for the financial well-being of my house, I'm responsible for the health of my house, but I cannot dictate anything, and anything I say can be questioned and second guessed and undermined and disobeyed, then how am I going to fulfill my responsibility? See, when things mess up, when there's a danger, when there's a threat, who's responsible to protect the house? It's me as the man. But if I can't set the rules and they're violent and they're undermined, then how am I going to achieve that responsibility? And subhanAllah, when I've seen couples that struggle with this because of the modern wave of feminism, and when the wives understood this, that listen, Islam does dictate that the husband can guide the family, can set rules. You know, for example, the husband can set rules for who the wife can associate with and cannot. Yes, this is within our faith. Why? Because what if the wife associates with a bad character that harms the household? Who's responsible to clean up that mess? At the end of the day, it's always going to fall on the man, and she's going to rely on that. So with the responsibility comes the authority. You cannot distinguish responsibility from authority. They have to come together. So this idea of undermining what it means to be a man, I think nothing is more beautiful than a masculine man with a feminine woman coming together. I mean, it's so beautiful. They complement each other so much. We live in a society where they don't even know what a man is and what a woman is. And if you try to identify one or the other, you're going to get attacked and smeared. That's satanic. The sunnah gives us a template of what a man is. We know what a man is, and we have the perfect, is it archetype or template of what a
Yeah.
man is. And that is
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have in the
Alayhi
Messenger of
salatu
Allah
wasalam.
a beautiful example for
Taslim.
whoever believes in Allah on the last day. So we know what manhood is. It is in following the sunnah, outwardly and inwardly, even in appearance. Yes, we have a template, mashallah, in character, in qualities of leadership, in forgiveness, in compassion, in mercy. What did the Prophet ﷺ teach? The merciful ones are shown mercy by the most merciful. Show mercy to those on earth, and the one in heaven will show mercy to you. And I speak about these in my khutbah. That's what male leadership is. Be a leader, but be a source of mercy, a source of guidance, a source of light. And it shows an example of what a woman is and how a woman should be. And it makes them so complementary where they both grow and excel together. The modern secular way is not working. Look at the skyrocketing divorce rates, look at the suicide rates, look at the drug rates, look at the adultery rates. The society is not working, and that's why so many people are flocking to Islam. That brings people back to their pure nature of humanity and what it means. So yes, I worry about our youth, and I worry about our youth because, you live in a time of Dajjal. Dajjal is what mixing truth and falsehood, which is what the Dajjal does. Now you can't even say what a man or a woman is, much less advocate for men being leaders, in the household, in society, in the family. And it's satanic, and the fruit, is in are visible by the results. The results speak for themselves. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. Look at what's happening. How many children born out of wedlock, falling into drugs, falling into crimes. And another thing I will say, statistically, children that come out of divorced households are much more likely to fall into atheism and secularism. They're much more likely to abandon their faith. They're also much more likely to have a lower net worth by the time they're adults. It impacts, and I think a lot of that is coming from selfishness. There is a modern trend right now, and I see it happening where a lot of times, mashallah, there's two disasters that are happening. One is people put off marriage. So, people are not getting married in their 20s. They're waiting until in their 30s. But how much sins, indecency, and immorality have they got involved with in those 10 years in their 20s? Because again, Islam is very practical. We have needs for compassion, for love, for intimacy. And if you don't express it in a legitimate way, you may express it in an illegitimate way. A lot of times the baggage of that indecency then carries into when people end up getting married, or they're traumatized or they're affected by it. So that's one major problem. The other major problem, though, is when Allah does bless some people to get married in their 20s, then the satanic bug hits them by the time they're in their 30s. I can't tell you how many female clients I've seen where, they've been told, oh, you gave up your youth in your 20s. You were just raising these kids. You got to choose you, put yourself first. I mean, I've heard it from
Oh my God, I hate that
from their
mantra.
own mouth, put yourself first. No, don't put yourself first. Nobody puts themselves first. As a husband, I put my family first. I put my children first. I put my wife first. As a wife, put your children first. There's this whole thing, no, choose you over. No, that's nonsense. What Allah describes the believers, they prefer others to themselves, even if poverty is their own lot. And that's talking about believers choosing strangers over themselves when they are hungry, when they're in need. So what about choosing your children over yourself? So there's the idea, well, in your 20s, you're raising the kids, you didn't live your life. So, get married in your 30s, take as much money as you can, travel the world. And it's satanic, and it's leading to broken homes. So You know, I do think, you know, I know this wasn't directly the question, but I believe that's one of the biggest risk factors towards our youth is not having positive male and female role models and having broken homes. And I believe the solution is both the husband and the wife need to follow the prophetic template of what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a wife, what it means to stand up for rights, what it means to forgive. And also, as men, look, very frankly, I'm going to give advice to men and women. For men, you need to learn emotional intelligence from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who taught us to be leaders, who taught us never give in to anger. So I'll be very frank, as a Muslim man, I say, you know, domestic violence is a tremendous threat to the marriages, because if a husband loses his cool once, you know, and the wife, you know, is traumatized by that, it can take a lot of damage to the relationship and lead to divorce. You know, it's just, it's wrong. The Prophet ﷺ never struck a woman or a child, you know. So if the Prophet ﷺ gave constant advice, and there's a reason I'm giving this advice, because it goes to another problem from the female side. But the Prophet ﷺ constantly said, La taghdab, do not get angry. The strong person is not the one who can defeat his enemy, but who can control his anger. So for men, I have to say, don't be emotional little bees, to keep it clean. Okay, don't be emotional. You have to control your emotion. You have to be leaders of calmness and coolness. You have to set the standard for peace within the house. And you never give in to anger. You never act on anger, whether it's guiding your spouse or disciplining your kids. It cannot be from a place of anger or compulsion. Even when correcting your children, you're correcting them for their sake, to make them better, not because you're angry that they disrespected you for your sake. It's not about your ego and your sake. It's about making sure these kids grow up to have respect for their elders. And there's a very different way. Look, if my child, alhamdulillah, I have amazing kids, but just say, for example, if one of my kids disrespected me, all right, how I react will be completely different if I react because I'm angry for my ego and I feel like my ego's been harmed, and how I react for that, versus if I'm reacting because I'm concerned that, oh my God, they disrespected me. That is bad for their spiritual and material well-being, and they need to change their attitude so they don't become disrespectful people that are far from the people and far from Allah. How you react based on your can be completely very different. A person who's responds with anger and harshness, God forbid even violence, they're reacting for their own ego. That's what, it's not about making the child better. And a person who's responding to make the child better will respond with wisdom. So that's the advice for men.
You can even see it from the outside.
100%, 100%. So for the men, just control your anger, understand that you're responsible for the success of the household and the peace. For the women, remember the greatness of appreciation and respect. Those go a long way, because modern feminism is destroying the principle of respect and honor towards husbands. And it is one of the most destructive things. Look, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Tala'tu fin nar fa idha akthara ahliha an-nisa." I looked in hellfire and I saw that there were many women there, you know, and one of the reasons was being ungrateful and disrespectful to the husbands. And I believe that's look, husbands need to be merciful and respectful and honorable, but the wives also need to be appreciative and respectful as well. And unfortunately, a lot of times, because we do, you know, marital counseling even and mediation, it's a tit for tat, you know, like the wife does something bad, so then the husband does something bad, and then the wife does, and it just, each one is matching the other in negativity. I say, why can't you match each other in kindness? Remember one good deed she's done for you and show her kindness, regardless of how the disrespect she's showing you. Be an example of kindness. Don't be a pushover, but show kindness and mercy. Be that example. And then for her, show the example of kindness, you know, because if we continue down the pattern of the divorces that we're seeing, you know, maybe us divorce lawyers will become very rich, but the community is going to be devastated. And we need to see a change. And what's been happening is not working.
Well, maybe you'll be rich for a little bit, but then once people stop getting married, then you won't be getting rich, because no one will be getting divorced, because no one will be married.
That's it. We'll make our money on the child support side on that point.
Yeah, that'll be child support lawyers. So what happens? Say, I want to go through some kind of examples. So you have, you know, young men who they want to get married. And I know some young men, but they see that, look, there's even a lot of righteous sisters, but when these sisters, we want to get married to them, we start talking to them and their families, even though they're practicing Muslimas, everything, they still have a lot of creeping feminism that's in them. Like, you know, I still don't need to be told what to do. If I want to go out, I don't have to get your permission. I can be friends with who I want. I can do what I want. And if you have a problem with that, then, you know, they might even try to justify it from Islam, right? They might go overboard and say that, you know, actually we do have these rights from Islam, even if they don't, right? And so what advice would you give to helping a brother who's in a situation, or maybe they've already gotten married and their wife is very good. She might even pray in the night, but she disobeys him because she doesn't think she's disobeying. She just thinks that it's cool. That this is within her parameters.
So look, honestly, I'm calling on the sisters on this. We need courses that literally teach people how to be wives, how to be mothers, right? And same for the brothers. We need courses that teach men how to be men. The issue that I see within the community is this. Subhanallah, we're letting the Islamophobes dictate the agenda. So what happened is years ago, the Islamophobes spread these false slanderous attacks that I don't even want to repeat, but that basically paint Islam as negative towards women. I don't even like to repeat the allegations because when you study the book, Don't Think of an Elephant, they say if you say don't think of an elephant, people think of an elephant. So you don't want to repeat their words of negativity. But the point is they painted that. So to compensate for that, many scholars spent the last decade or two talking about how Islam empowers women, and it does. But they've almost exclusively focused on women's rights and very scared to talk about women's responsibilities. So we've raised a generation of sisters that are a bit unrealistic in their expectations, that feel very entitled, and have been taught for 20 years how much Islam honors them, and it does. But without the balance of the hadith, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ said, and people are afraid to say this, if I could order anyone to bow down to anyone, I would order the wife to bow down to her husband. That's in the hadith. I mean, these are clear hadith. The other hadith is, about people being in hellfire, women being in hellfire for dishonoring their husband. So Islam has so many teachings about honoring women, but it also gives women responsibility. It gives them agency, accountability before God. And I feel that the problem has been when we've spoken so much about the rights and almost no one is talking about the responsibilities, it's led to an unhealthy situation. So my advice to the brothers is, look, have these talks very early on. And I think if you're going to get legally married, have the discussion about a prenup where we can talk about all these issues. If you're not getting legally married, talk about a cohabitation agreement. And if she's not okay with it, trust me, there's plenty of sisters that are genuinely looking for good brothers. Don't get caught up. The worst thing that I've seen is when a man gets too caught up over a woman, or vice versa. You have a Romeo and Juliet situation. There's no reason to have a Romeo and Juliet situation. Allah made billions of men and women out there. And I'm sure there's millions that you could fall in love with. I mean, that's just statistically true. So for, how many times we've seen people destroy their household, destroy their families over the opposite gender. It's never worth it.
Yeah. SubhanAllah. So I'm blanking out right now. Oh my God. I got distracted with your Romeo and Juliet.
Sorry, Habibi.
No, it's okay.
I'll text my kids in the meantime. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, this is like a rare moment. I'm gonna drink some water.
I've left you speechless, my brother.
I'm gonna cut this out.
Cut this out. Usually it's only the ladies that leave speechless, but I'll take it.
I am wearing a pink sweater right now, so
yeah, there we go. It's the effect of that, bro. But how's the content? What I'm saying is okay. It's not too spicy for the show.
So the youth,
yeah,
everybody has to have role models, and if someone doesn't have a good role model, they're gonna end up picking a role model, whatever they have. Like, this is just human nature. Sure. And so the youth, when they fall into finding these bad role models, a lot of times Muslims, especially me for my kids, we try to give them good role models from the Sahaba. The Prophet ﷺ is the best role model. But a lot of times I see amongst the youth that I've dealt with and spoken to, it's not, they're not as reticent, right? They're kind of reluctant to want to learn about it because I feel like they're just so overwhelmed with entertainment. And if it's not entertaining enough, like, they can't sit there and listen long enough to actually learn the era. They don't want to go through a 103 episode series on the Prophet ﷺ, which each episode is an hour and a half long, right? They want something that's fun, lots of images, flashing lights, something kind of cool, makes you laugh a little bit, and then, maybe 15 minutes and then it's done. So how do we get the youth to take the role models they need to take, right? If they're not even attracted to the way that it's even presented.
All right, that's a great question. Look, it starts with the parents. Parents have to take tremendous responsibility. And it can start with something as simple as from the time the children are a young age. See, a lot of times the problem is people wait till it's too late, and then it really is too late. But if you start from a young age, children will follow the example of their parents, inshallah. I mean, you have the example of Nuh alayhi salam, and even prophets, some of them had their children go astray. But at least Nuh alayhi salam did his part. We got to do our part. If you're not even doing your part, then you got no one to blame but yourself. MashaAllah, my daughter, she's 2 years old. Literally just barely started talking. Definitely can't have a conversation with her. Cannot tell her to pray. But I will tell you, alhamdulillah, in my house, we actually have a musalla room, with actual masjid carpet. And we
MashaAllah.
try, when I'm not going to the masjid, we try to pray in the house together. Every single time we go to pray with my family, my youngest daughter, 2 years old, runs on her own, finds her hijab, puts her hijab on her own, and is praying with us on her own without being told. It's just, alhamdulillah, from the home environment.
Yeah.
You have to set the example. Kids will follow what they see, not what they are told. The other thing is, look, being a Muslim lawyer and traveling for charity and everything that I do, I mean, I'm extremely busy. I barely get, I haven't had a weekend at home in 3 months. May Allah help me. But when I am home, I really try to prioritize daily time to study with the kids. And it doesn't have to be much. It really just can be praying Maghrib together. And then after Maghrib for 5 minutes, sitting and reading a book of hadith that talk about targhib and tarhib, that talk about Jannah, the hereafter, Islamic character, the prophetic biography. Start with something little. Build that love. When you build that love, then the children on their own will seek the way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that example has to start, I think, at home and from the parents. And then they can find the entertaining ways and the fun ways and the ways to keep their attention. But it starts with that daily, consistent support from the house. And again, it doesn't have to take long. I'm telling you, even 5-10 minutes after prayer, reading a few ahadith and building the love and just being that example for your kids will go a long way.
MashaAllah, that's great advice. I really appreciate it. So it's not, you don't just get to drop your kids off at daycare for 15 years. And then once you start practicing and you want them to practice as well with you and love the things they need to love, it's not just going to all of a sudden happen like like a magic trick.
5 minutes a day after Maghrib prayer with your kids will do far more than leaving them for 5 hours at Sunday school, or Saturday school, on the weekend or whatever they're doing. It's though that relationship that you built. And I think we as parents, we have to build the love of Allah in our hearts. We really do. We have to fall in love with Allah. We have to remember Allah abundantly. And that will, inshallah, radiate to our children. And we also have to honor and love the scholars. So there's two things, right? Honoring our parents and honoring our scholars and our elders. It's been proven throughout history and really established through the faith teachings that if you honor your parents, Allah will bless you in your wealth and in your life. In fact, disobedience to the parents is one of the things where the punishment is actually rushed in the dunya. It affects your risk. It actually affects your lifespan potentially and your wealth. So honoring the parents, inshallah, will open the doors of risk and wealth and a healthy, longer life. Bi'idhnillah. Honoring the honoring the scholars will, inshallah, the effect of honoring and loving the scholars and the friends of Allah and those committed to the faith, the effect of that will be your children loving the religion as well. So those are the two secrets. If you want a long and healthy, wealthy life, honor your parents. If you want your children to love the religion, show honor and love to the scholars of Islam. And inshallah, that will radiate through your kids.
MashaAllah, that's amazing. Allahu Akbar. Well, the next question, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this, is people, I know you advocate for this all the time. Even though it seems like it's, I don't know, just from my perspective, seems like it's kind of quieted down a little bit, but I feel like people are still getting approached, right, by the FBI. Even the youth are getting approached. People get approached. What should a person do? Should they say, "Hey, I got nothing to hide. I'm going to talk to these guys. I'm not worried."
Worst thing you can say. Yeah. Worst thing you can say. Thank you for that great question. I'm sure you saw my IG video I just posted on this. The worst thing you can do is talk to the FBI without a lawyer. I spent a decade of my life trying to protect the Muslim community from that. I've seen firsthand the harm and the damage that happens when you do that. And the biggest victims are those who have done nothing wrong and have nothing to hide. because they talk too much, and that even presumes that the agenda itself is fair and honest. And whoever thinks that has no understanding of American history. I mean, let's not forget COINTELPRO, where the FBI was actively trying to destroy African-American leaders, African-American civil rights organizations. The agency has a history of that. Look, there's a lot of great and phenomenal FBI agents, and there's a lot of crooked ones too. There's ones who are happy to get the promotion that they want at the back of framing a Muslim. You know, author Trevor Aronson. And it doesn't have to be many. Even if 1% of the agents are crooked, that's enough to cause real damage. So author Trevor Aronson actually published a study in his amazing book, The Terror Factory, Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism, which shows that there's not enough terrorists attacking America, thank God, to justify the billions of dollars that the FBI has to capture terrorists. So what they do is they actually find mentally ill individuals
Oh my
and
God.
trick them to do crimes that they could not do on their own and would not do on their own. I met a Muslim brother in jail here in Florida after he was convicted and given 40 years in jail. When I met him, the first thing the guard said before I saw him was, go get him some clothes. I said, what do you mean clothes? He's in a room naked because he's mentally unwell and he's on suicide watch. They gave him paper clothes to wear that just barely cover his privates. And I was freezing in that room, and I was like in my suit, you know. And what I realized, and I spoke to this kid, he was a young kid in his early 20s, clearly mentally unwell. A Muslim brother that I know that was actively involved in the community was paid by the government to convince him to try to attack a nightclub and provided him the fake weapons. And he just brainwashed the kid who's mentally unwell and needs mental health help to do a crime he never would have done, never would have thought of, and never could have done on his own. And now he's going to spend the next 40 years in jail. And he's so unwell that in jail, he's not even given clothes because of his situation. I couldn't sleep when I went home that night. You know, we talk about the kid, but let's talk about the so-called Muslim brother that I know. And I have a deathbed confession recording of him admitting, I spoke to that man because he was well respected within the Muslim community, who was used to brainwash this kid. They caught him on some, he was going through financial trouble. He spoke to them without a lawyer. They caught him up on it. And then they said, we'll make your problems go away if you work for us. You know, so the issue is, when you speak to them without a lawyer, you open the door for them to pressure you to become an agent provocateur and go after the mentally unwell within the Muslim community. Don't say you'll never fall into it. You never know what kind of leverage they'll try to get to you. You know,
all of us
look,
and our families.
I mean, Allah protect us. The FBI is allowed to lie to you. You're not allowed to lie to them. And the only record of the conversation is what they write in the report. And if they write something in their report that contradicts facts or contradicts something you say to them later, they can charge you with lying to them, can be punishable by up to 8 years in jail. And the only way out of it is if you start working for them and trying to entrap the mentally ill. It happens. So look, remember, that's the dark side. Let's talk about the good side. The good side is, listen, we live in America. We have the U.S. Constitution. And the Fifth Amendment gives you the right to remain silent, and the Sixth Amendment, the right to a lawyer. Those were not put to protect the guilty. The founding fathers were not there thinking, how can we protect criminals? They were put to protect the innocent, because the founding fathers recognized that when innocent people talk to the government without a lawyer, the government can easily entangle them in things that they're not responsible for. So to protect the innocent, the Fifth Amendment was put, that you have the right not to talk to them without a lawyer. So if the FBI ever contacts you and wants to speak to you, do not speak to them without a lawyer. You can go to muslimlegal.com and we can represent you. We are a private law firm, so we do charge. We don't take donations. But if that's an issue, go to CAIR. You know, they have offices all over the country. They do incredible work, and they'll represent you free of charge. That's an option there, you know, but never speak to them without a lawyer. That's the best advice. Also, when you're traveling, if you're an American citizen or a green card holder, they may sometimes stop you at the border, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, to ask you questions. Remember, if you're a U.S. citizen, you do have to identify, you know, yourself, and if you're traveling with $10,000 or more in cash as a group, and if you have any fruits or vegetables. Short of that, though, you don't have to answer their questions about your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, and it's not wise to answer. I mean, once they stopped me and then they took me right away, I said, aren't you going to ask me anything? They're like, no, our notes say you don't answer questions. Now I just get saluted by the head of customs when I go. They just want me right out of there because they know I'll give them a headache if they stop me. So understand, if you're a U.S. citizen, they have to let you in the country, and you don't have to answer any political or religious questions, nor should you. And if they harass you when you travel, again, you can contact my firm, muslimlegal.com, or you can contact CAIR, and they can assist you free of charge. But we have to stand up for our rights, know our rights, and protect our rights.
Awesome. That's amazing, mashallah. Thank you for empowering us and letting us have that insight. I think that's going to be really valuable to Muslims. Hopefully none of us ever have to worry about this, deal with it, but there are unfortunate realities that we live with today. So I think we've had a great show so far, mashallah. Do you have any final words, to wrap up with before we close out?
A reminder to myself and all of us, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Just beware of the day that you're going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we remember that day, I think we will change how we interact with each other. Remember, Shaitan has been plotting to destroy us for generations, and he has his satanic diseases and his satanic qualities. Satanic diseases are arrogance, jealousy, hatred, right? The satanic tactics are sowing division between community members, between Muslim organizations, between preachers, between husband and wife. So whenever you're in a situation, ask yourself, am I falling into a satanic trap, or am I following the prophetic path? Is how I'm handling this going to bring me closer to Allah or farther away? Remember, the Prophet ﷺ said the first people to enter paradise, and those who enter paradise without judgment. I'm sharing with you my favorite hadith and what got me through some difficult times, is that the first people to enter paradise and those who enter paradise without judgment are those who thank Allah in times of goodness and in times of hardship. So we should take on that quality. When times are good, thank Allah by using the good Allah has given you to serve others. And when times are tough, be thankful to Allah by trusting in His plan and having a good opinion of Him that He will get you through it. And if you do that, you will not give into falling into oppression and injustice during those difficult times, which can destroy you. So that's my advice. Just don't fall into the satanic traps. Be grateful to Allah. Remember, you will meet Him, and treat those around you with the kindness and the mercy that our Prophet ﷺ taught us to interact with. And if we can help you in any of your legal needs, reach out to muslimlegal.com. Anything from marriage, prenuptial agreements, immigration, criminal defense when people are falsely accused, estate planning, wills, trusts. We're here to help Muslims achieve their legal needs in an Islamic ethical way. We proudly represent many sisters, many brothers, many children in trying to preserve their rights and protect their life in this life and in the next through Islamic ethical representation.
All right, Jazal Khair, brother. Stay back there. We'll talk after we finish up.
Thank you, Sagir.
Jazal Khair, Allah bless the brother for coming on. We really appreciate him for his time that he has given us today with his valuable insights and information, the resources that he has offered out there for you guys to go get in contact with. And please, brothers and sisters, don't hesitate to, go, and I'll put all of his information in the description below. So if you need to contact him with any kind of family matters, whether you want to get married or divorced, God forbid, or any other serious or non-serious issues, whether it be estate, inheritance, whatsoever, please contact Muslim Legal and go get the help that you need to protect yourself from injustice happening to you and to your family. 80% of you guys who watch me and follow me are not subscribed. So those of you who do watch, please make sure you subscribe. And, if you like this, hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all of our interviews, the reactions, our shorts that we do for, all of the funny bunnies who like to throw attacks at Islam, and my reactions to that. Anything that I have said that is good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and any mistakes or any deficiencies are from myself and the shaitan. I ask Allah to bless every single one of you. Guys, saddle up on that subscribe, lasso that like, and as always, cowboys can be Muslim too. Assalamu alaikum.